Hello everyone, welcome back. Today, at the request of one of my viewers, we're going to talk about building a pistol versus building an AR. Okay, the key word there is building, because building a pistol usually means something different than building an AR. And then there's a new word that comes into play when we're talking about the ARs. That word is milling. Okay, so we're going to talk about those things to help kind of put everything into perspective, so that basically we're all kind of using the same words and we all know what we're talking about. So with the pistols, right? Um, Usually, you have your it divides into two parts, right? You got your slide and your frame, and what we do is we buy the frame in 80% form, and we have to complete it. And the completion process is pretty simple. It basically involves drilling the holes, clipping the tabs, and then clearing out the channel. The channel clearing is pretty easy. Usually, I'll take some snips, I'll snip them out, and then I'll use a Dremel to finish it off and get that nice and smooth. Okay, and this does not have a whole lot of parts, right? There's very few parts in this, I think, compared to the rifle. Um, once the frame is finished, right? It's pretty easy to throw everything together. Now, um, assembly and getting the gun to work are two completely different things, right? Because maybe it'll take you an hour to assemble this, but may take you a significantly longer time to get the gun reliable. The first one that I built took me like 2 months to get it working reliably. Okay, Polymer 80 tells you that the break-in period is 200 rounds. So until you've actually fired 200 rounds in this, you haven't completed the building process. Okay, so when we talk, but the key point here is when we're talking about building a pistol, we're talking about an 80% frame that we finish, and the finishing work is really not that hard. Right now, there's other issues involved, like getting the rails straight, getting the pins in, which can sometimes be a pain in the ass, getting all the holes to match up. Um, but there's the work on the frame itself is not that much. You can do that with pretty simple tools. Usually, I use snips, a drill, a Dremel, some files, so pretty basic tools that most people already have in their house, or you can get pretty cheap. I mean, probably like the snips. I mean, you can get them for like $10. The Dremel, I think, is like $30. So and it's also, these tools are also small. They don't take up a whole lot of space. Okay, so let's talk about building an AR. Okay, now there's a distinction here, usually, and we're talking about the common wording that people use. Okay, when people say building an AR, what we're usually talking about is just assembly. All right, so they're buying all factory parts and they are assembling them. They're not doing any manufacturing. With this, we're talking about manufacturing. Okay, with this, we're talking about assembly. What I will usually do is I will buy a stripped lower receiver that has a serial number on it. It goes through a background check, and now I have to add all the stuff to it. Okay, now that's different from milling. Okay, milling, we're talking about buying an 80% receiver, like this was, right, and completing it. Let me pull this apart and let's talk a little bit about milling. Use a case. If you guys ever have a hard time getting the pins out, just use the rim of a case and they'll come right out. Okay, so if you buy an 80% receiver, okay, what you're gonna get is this trigger area over here is gonna be completely filled in. So this area here is gonna be either a solid aluminum or solid plastic. And there's some work involved in getting all that material out. Okay, what you need is a drill press, and what they call like an XY axis, where you can lock the receiver in and it either moves this way or it moves that way, and you can restrict the motion. And because the difficulty is you gotta basically carve out this area here exactly the way it's supposed to be, and you do get a jig, right? You do get a jig, but you know, here's the thing: I made one attempt at it, and it was a disaster. I ended up milling out a little bit too close to the sidewalls over here, and I weakened the frame, and so it didn't go too well for me. So as part of the process of milling, you can expect to fail a couple of times. Okay, don't, you know, you may not get it right the first time. So that's just part of the process that you've got to go through, because a lot of it comes down to figuring out how to set up your drill press, figuring out how to set up your XY axis, and in the process, you know, you might make some mistakes. Okay, with the frames, I mean, with the pistol frames, I've never had a complete failure on this. Yeah, I've always been able to get it to work, because there's only so much damage that it is, you know, unless you destroy this somehow, right? Because there's so little material that you're removing, that it's hard to damage the rest of it. Sometimes people will say that they misdrill the holes, but you can always fill those in with JB Weld. Let it sit for 2 days and then re-drill it. I did have to do that one time, but you know, this, even if you screw this up, it most likely will be salvageable. However, with the lower receiver, if you drill out, if you mill this out too far and basically come through the wall here or make the wall too thin, it's really hard to add back that material. Okay, so there's a lot more work involved with this. The machinery involved is a little bit more expensive, takes up more space. Okay, I have a drill press. It's one of the cheaper ones, right? I think maybe, of course, I don't know. Basically, somewhere, I don't remember, somewhere between $100 and $200. And the problem is that the cheaper ones, because these things have like these pulleys with a belt at the top, and what happens is they can start slipping as you're working, trying to mill them, because they're really not meant for milling. The cheaper drill presses, they're meant more for just drilling a hole. To be able to mill this out, well, you probably need a more expensive drill press, and again, you need that XY axis, and you know, you probably gotta, you know, if I was gonna make another attempt at that, I would probably buy like 5 of these frames, with the intention that, hey, I may screw up the first one, the second one, the third one. By the time I get to the 4th and the 5th one, I'm probably gonna get this thing working right. So that's the approach that I would take to milling this out, right? So that's the thing to understand. There's a lot more work involved with an 80% AR frame. You gotta basically drill the holes here, mill this out, but then you also gotta mill out the trigger hole, right? And it's not a round hole where you can just drill straight through. You have to kind of, again, you gotta mill it. You gotta move this thing back and forth to the right distance. And again, they do give you a jig, but there's just more chance for error. Okay, so, but that's the distinction between building and milling. Okay, and normally with pistols, because we're using the same word in a different way. When we're talking about building a pistol frame, right, or a pistol, we're usually talking about working with an 80% frame. When we're talking about working with an 80% AR receiver, we're talking about milling, okay? Where we're milling out that metal. Now, when we talk about building an AR, in most cases, people are talking about assembly, where they will buy a complete lower receiver with the serial number on it. It goes to an FFL, you get the background check, right? So now you've got the stripped lower, and now you start adding all the things. They're not hard. There's tons of videos out there on how to do it. Now, some things, like for example, like changing out the trigger group. Again, the first time I had to do it, I had to go watch a video, and the reason why I had to do it is because if you do high round counts, you know, like as you approach 10,000 rounds, the trigger, the sears in your trigger are going to wear out. Okay, so that's the first thing I learned with ARs, is that I learned how to change the trigger groups as they wear out. All right. And then the rest of it is the buffer tube back here. There's a castle nut here. Again, plenty of videos out there on how to remove this. And you've got your pins which I think that once you remove this end plate, there's a spring with an indent that pulls back, and that comes out. On this one over here, I actually cannot remember how this goes in. So again, I'd have to watch a video. I don't remember how the front pin goes in, or how I would have to take it out. Okay, so as far as the bolt catch, that's the other thing here. The bolt catch, there's a roll pin that goes through here. That roll pin can be a pain in the ass to get in there, right? Because you got to basically brace this. You kind of need 3 hands, basically, 3 arms. You got to hold this like this, put the roll pin over there. Usually I'm doing this like kind of on my leg, you know, kind of trying to situate it somehow like this, right? And then you tap that roll pin in, right? So, you know, so you put your spring in there, and then you put the bolt catch, and then you put your pin. Again, if I was to do this, I'd go watch somebody else's videos. I'm not an expert on everything, okay? But I know enough about this to explain the differences to you guys. Other thing is the magazine release here. Magazine release, that's pretty easy. That just basically kind of twists in. So you push this all the way through, and then you just start twisting this out. So you know, and then you know when you put your buffer, your buffer tube back here, attach your stock. There's the buffer spring that goes over here. So you get not hard stuff if we're talking about assembling, which normally we say building. Okay, so that's your lower receiver. And over here, as far as the upper, okay, as far as the upper, what I usually do is I buy this complete, right? Because this does not have a serial number on it. This can ship directly to your house. So I bought a few of these from Palmetto State Armory. But almost all AR companies sell these separate, right? Where they'll ship it straight to your house. Radical sells them. It's another company I bought stuff from. Bear Creek. I haven't bought anything from Bear Creek, but I've heard lots of good stuff about Bear Creek. So the upper receivers, you know, if you're doing this for the first time, I would just buy the complete, you know, with the barrel, rail, you know, bolt, charging handle, and it'll be cheaper if you buy the whole thing. I mean, I think the price usually comes in somewhere around 300, maybe up to 400 for, you know, for a more, you know, a more Gucci one, right? But they usually they'll come in around 300. I bought these as cheap as like 220, I think. So buy it complete. If you buy it separate, right, where you buy the upper receiver, the barrels, the rails, all separate, you have to buy a block where this, you know, that will go into the upper receiver, so you can put this in a vise, and then you can attach your barrel. So you need a torque wrench. You need that block. The other thing that you'll need is you'll need some gauges for head spacing, okay? Because if you're attaching the barrel yourself, basically the bullet has to sit a certain amount of distance from the barrel, so it has to be properly head spaced. Okay, so you have to get into proper head spacing. Otherwise, you could have problems. Okay, you know, problems of the kaboom kind. So I usually just buy these. They don't have to go through an FFL, so I just ship these to my house. It's cheaper, right? I can get the whole thing for like whatever, 200, 220, 250, something like that. You know. So yeah, it's just easier, cheaper to get this complete. What else was I going to say? Now, let's put this back together, and I want to talk to you guys about. Okay, so let me say this: with pistols, there was a great urgency on my part. Oh, right. There was a great urgency on my part to learn to build these, and the reason is because in my state, when you purchase a pistol, the state police, you know, basically gets that information, and the state police in Pennsylvania has a registry, right? So I wanted to have pistols that were not on their registry. Now, the funny thing is that in Pennsylvania, it's illegal for a registry to exist. And what they did is they got around it by saying, well, it's not really a registry because it's not complete, because people can if they move into the state, they can bring guns from out of state and it doesn't go into that registry. They can inherit it, or they can build them. So hence, it is not a complete registry. So that was a big part of the motivation for why I got into building pistols, because in my state, if you buy them through an FFL, the state police gets a report, and I don't, I want to have some guns that are not on their list. So hence the motivation to start building these. They're easy enough to build. If you watch videos, right, you gotta watch the videos like I did. That's how I learned. I watched other people's videos, and then I started making my own videos. So, because the more videos that you watch and you hear things in a slightly different way, it helps, right? So, you don't want to just get all your information from one source, because a different video from a different person might show you a different view. You might hear the words a little bit differently. You might understand them better. So, yeah, I try to get as much information from as many different sources as possible. But anyway, that's the reason why I got into pistol building. Now with the rifles, okay, if you buy an AR in my state, it does not end up in the list. The state police does not get that report. Furthermore, in this state, it is legal to privately buy and sell the rifles. Okay, and that's significant because even though the government, right, the federal government may maintain a database of the rifles, right, because it's still legal to privately buy and sell them. Right? If in the future they ever if in the future they ever tried gun confiscation, I'm in a position to say I no longer have that rifle because I sold it back when it was legal for me to privately sell it, and at the time I didn't need to maintain a record. Okay, so I have deniability. I can say I no longer have this because I sold it privately when it was legal to do so, and at the time I was not required to keep a record. So that gives me deniability, all right, to say I don't have that. As far as the pistols, if in my state, if now you can have I can transfer a pistol to an immediate family member, right? But I can't transfer it to anybody else. Okay, so if in the future, let's say they try to do some gun confiscation, right? If as far as the serialized guns, if they come to my door and they say, hey, we know you got this serialized Glock, right? What am I going to say? I can't say that I no longer have it because I sold it, because they're going to say, okay, great. What FFL did you sell it through? We'll go to them and get the information and try and track it down, okay? Because I can't sell it, what am I going to say? I sold it to an immediate family member, because now they're going to run over to that family member, okay? So with the pistols, I do not have deniability, okay? Of course I can always say I lost it, but how many pistols am I going to lose, right? So with the pistols, I do not have deniability, because in my state, the state police keeps a registry. However, with the ones that I build, which I legally build, right, they don't end up on that registry, and at this point in time, it is legal for me to build them. I don't have to report anything. So that's why it was really important for me to get into building the pistols. Okay? So those are some of the differences that I think matter, okay, especially if you're coming into this as a beginner and trying to figure out, hey, I've already done this. Do I now want to do that? You probably want to do build. You want to probably build first, where you're just buying the parts and assembling them. And then after you do that and get good at that, then I would look into maybe getting into milling. Again, now we're talking about a bigger investment. You need a drill press, not a cheap one, a good one. And you probably got to buy a couple of 80% frames so that you can practice on it to get better. So yeah, definitely go the building route first, where you just do the assembly. With this, it's a whole lot easier. I wish with the 80% receivers on the AR, they had designed these the same way they designed those frames, where all you had to do was just snip out the channel. That's what they should have done. Well, that's what Polymer 80 should have tried to push through. They probably did, and they were probably denied. Well, I guess we can consider ourselves lucky that we got away with what we did with the pistol frames. So hope this video was informative. Hope you all enjoyed it. If you got any questions, let me know. And like I said, as far as milling ARs, I've made one attempt at that. It didn't go too well. There's tons of videos out there. Just search milling AR receiver, and you'll get tons of videos that pop up, and you can watch how people do that, and you'll pick up more tips from them. Okay, so make sure you guys are following me on my uncensored platforms, on Odyssey, on Pocono Tactical, on Rumble, I'm Pocono Guns. Also on YouTube, I got two other channels, 3 channels total. I got Pocono Shooting, Absolute Gun Rights, and I got the original Safa channel. Talk to you all soon.